Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I feel like we should play the national anthem too.
Okay, roll call. Let's go. I'm here, so. Barbara's by Zoom. Does she have to say aye? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Brian Thomas,
Aye.
Debbie Dutton,
Aye.
Marianne Shealy,
Aye.
Mike Hauser,
Aye.
Scott Safford.
Aye.
Okay, that's,
Jack, we should have a vote as to whether or not to allow Barbara to participate via Zoom.
oh, okay. We have to have a vote. We're allow Barbara to participate. Who motions that?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Brian motion. Got second. Okay.
Then you actually have to vote.
Oh, okay. We have to take a vote now.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who vote? Who?
Everybody voted aye.
Okay, everybody.
Well, this is for the minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, that's okay.
okay. Okay, now we're on to reorganization. Do I have any nominations for chair?
Brian Thomas.
Who do you nominate, Brian?
Yeah, right, exactly. The ghost person not here.
Do you accept, Brian?
Sure. Sure, I'd be
Okay,
happy
do
to.
we vote on that? Okay, who wants a,
I'll second it.
okay. Who won? Michael, okay. Okay, now we have a nomination for a vice chair. Who wants to be the vice chair?
You're doing a great job.
Yeah. Okay, I accept them. Go on, you.
I'll
have to
second it.
Never accept, okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll get through this. Okay, now we have approval of the minutes. Has everybody reviewed the minutes?
I would like to have one change. I actually sent Joe an email telling him that I was not going to be in attendance. So I thought that we were clear. I was going to do my best to be on the meeting, but it said it wasn't in attendance, not excused.
Oh, I didn't even realize it said that. No, it should be excused. I apologize. I didn't
That's
even
okay.
notice that.
Approval minutes with changes or just approval?
With changes.
Okay, approval of the minutes with changes.
Aye.
Who voted or who say who?
Mike.
Okay, Michael. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Today's
The 13th. Unanimous.
Oh, it's a big one.
Okay, we'll do it later. Thank you.
Okay, that's true. There's nobody, any public comment? Nobody's here, so we'll move on. Okay, Bill, you're in charge.
Good morning, everyone. I have my usual update for you. The status of the procurement, I wanted to start off with that. There's really been no progress since the last meeting. We had identified 3 potential systems that met our requirements, but the next step would be to schedule demonstrations. But with the audit, we just haven't had any free time to do that. So, but that is the very next thing that we'll be doing in terms of the steps in the process. And we already had representatives reaching out to us to schedule those. So we should be doing that soon. As far as the 2023 audit, the accounting manager and the staff, they've been working hard to prepare everything for the year-end close, reconciliations, adjustments, the audit schedules. We had originally thought the field work would begin on the 22nd, but it began on April 29th, which was good for us in the sense that we had that much more time to pull together everything and make it easier for the auditors to begin. It's still expected to conclude by the end of May, and our goal is to meet the standard deadline of June 30th without having to seek any extensions. I am a little bit concerned, however, because the size and the volume of the emergency fund transactions, is quite large. There's $20 million of transactions. There's quite a bit for the auditors to review. So if there is a delay, I anticipate that could possibly be the reason. But so far, so good. I just finished working on the master spreadsheet of all of the FEMA and emergency expenditures. There's like 70 columns of data, 1,850 lines of data, and what we're trying to accomplish by that is to make sure that every single expense is assigned the appropriate FEMA project number, so that we can then close the year with a true accounting, accurate accounting of all of the emergency expenditures by project. And this was challenging this year because so many of these project numbers were not identified until actually almost a year out. So we didn't have these numbers at the time, so they were not captured in the accounting system at the time, so we're having to go back and do it after the fact. But we're trying to make sure that we're in sync with Tidal Basin, who is preparing all this information for us to submit to the FEMA portal, so that all of the supporting documentation for each of these expenses, that whether it's invoices, the procurement information, all of that's collected along with this and is submitted to the FEMA portal. So it's a huge effort, and we're very appreciative of Tidal Basin's support in that. Since we were finalizing the year, we were able to come up with the final lost revenue figure, and previously I had been trying to calculate it by comparing actual 2022 revenue to the 2023 budget, and the reason why I was doing that is the 2023 budget was what we thought. No, I'm sorry, I'm saying this incorrectly. I was comparing the FY23 revenue to the FY23 budget, because the FY23 budget is what we thought, from a conservative viewpoint, what we should have expected to receive in a normal year. But it seems to be more conservative and more accurate to actually compare lost revenue, to do that calculation for accounting purposes by comparing 2023 actual revenue to 2022 revenue, because that's a hard number. It's more or less an indisputable number, and so then that difference is more solid, that calculation of that difference. And I did go through and identify what I believed were revenues that were affected by the hurricane in 2023 and those that were not, and by only focusing on the ones that were, that's how I came up with the lost revenue calculation, and that's found on pages 10 and 11 of the report package. And the grand total lost revenue was $3,085,209. And I have it divided by department because one of the things then that has just happened at the last town council meeting was, now that we had the final figure, the town council authorized the transfer of the $3,885,209 from the bridge loan fund to the general fund to offset all of these revenues. And the transfer, the accounting transfer, is retroactive to September 30th. And why that's important is, number one, it was because we did need the bridge loan for fiscal year 2023. And otherwise, if we had not had that, we would have ended the year with $22,000 of cash in the general fund. So that, those are two reasons why we chose to do it that way. And I can say a little bit more about that. I think I have a little insert in my report in a few minutes from now. The FY24 lost revenue, then, for the sake of consistency, I'm also comparing 2024 revenue to 2022 revenue to calculate what was lost so far this year. But we're scaling it down to 6 months worth. So what I did was I took the monthly average revenue for 2022 multiplied times 6 to get a 6 months worth, and then compared that to the 6 months worth of revenue collected so far in 2024 to come up with an estimated lost revenue. And so far this year it's $651,000. For budgeting purposes, we had estimated that it would be almost $3.5 million. So for 6 months in the year, the first 6 months of the year, we're doing fairly well, although we do collect most of our tax revenue in the beginning of the year, so I think that's skewing this number a bit. Let's see, the FEMA public assistance projects, there's not a lot that's changed there other than Tidal Basin is continuing to work on collecting the supporting documentation for the projects and submitting it to FEMA. We still have the same number of projects. We started out with 37. 11 of them were consolidated into one project, and so we're down to 27 separate FEMA projects. Okay, then, just so that you have the same information that's probably going to go out to the public, we had a reporter ask some important questions that I really had not stopped to consider, specifically the answers to these questions until they were asked. And the reporter was doing an article about the sufficiency of our emergency reserves when Hurricane Ian hit, and whether we had sufficient reserves on hand to help us through the time until assistance came. And so by looking back at the situation, of course I wasn't here at that particular time, I came in March afterwards, but it looks like they had $537,000 specifically in the emergency reserve fund. There was also $1,060,000 committed as an emergency reserve in the general fund, and then there was also a $600,000 operating reserve in the general fund. In addition to that, there was $443,000 of contingency that was included in the budget for 2023. And so all of those things theoretically would be available in an emergency setting. And in addition to that, there was $3.6 million sitting in the general fund that was scheduled to be transferred to the capital fund for future capital projects. So although it wasn't specifically designated for an emergency, the cash would have been available to help temporarily fund an emergency situation. And that's exactly what happened. Because the town did incur about $3.5 million of expenses for emergency overtime, supplies, contractual services, and all of that was incurred during the first 2 months of the response to Hurricane Ian. So it took until after those first 2 months for insurance proceeds to start coming in, and then an expedited payment from FEMA. So the town had to fund that $3.5 million of emergency expense from its own funds, and that's where it depleted the emergency reserve fund, the general fund emergency reserve, the general fund operating reserve, the contingency, and then also about $1 million of the capital reserve. So all of that was utilized to get through those first 2 months. But then we did receive after that $7.5 million or $7.6 million from FEMA for expedited funding, and then we started receiving the insurance reimbursements. So that was able to replenish the cash that had been used until that point. Let's see. And then one of the other questions that was asked by the reporter is, having had that experience, how is that affecting our plans for the future in terms of an emergency reserve? And we're still in the process of doing that. We're still evaluating things, and that is a very important thing that we need to address. We're in a precarious state in the sense that revenues are still lost. And so it's not that we have extra funding to be able to set aside at this point, but it's certainly something we need to plan to do as soon as we're able to do that. We're fortunate that we have the bridge loan to carry us through this far. Speaking of the bridge loan, I do have it on available funding sources. I have an update there in the bottom half of page 7. So an update regarding the bridge loan is that I don't know if you remember me explaining that the bridge loan originally had a repayment term of 1 year. So the loan would be paid, or was due to be paid in full June 30th of this year. That was the original agreement. There was a provision for a 6-month extension. Since that loan was agreed upon between us and the state, there was legislation that came through that extended it another 2 years. It's a signed legislation, so it is in effect, but we did not receive an updated agreement. I did reach out to the state to make sure that it wasn't due June 30th, and I did receive a response back in writing saying that it is not due June 30th, that at this point it would be due 2 years from now, but there's legislation waiting to be signed by the governor that would extend it 10 years, and they're expecting that it would be signed. So as soon as that legislation is signed, then we'll receive an updated agreement with the terms. So it is, whatever the case, it's not due yet, and we have another 2 years at least to repay it. Let's see. On page 7, still, I wanted to just include the full list of all the available funding sources, and I highlighted the only things that were updated. So under the $6.7 million capital improvement loan, it was set to expire on May 1st. And so this loan was specifically agreed to by the bank to fund the Bayside Park, Bay Oaks Recreational Facility, and Times Square improvements. So it's limited to that. So by May 1st, we were only able to complete $250,000 worth of improvements that fall under those categories. And so that is the amount that's the final amount that was submitted to the bank for reimbursement. So that of that $10 million loan, original loan, that left $6.5 million unutilized. Another update then is we've learned through a meeting with our Angie Brewer, who's our consultant for our state revolving loan fund. And there's an additional $10.7 million available for stormwater improvements that would protect the wastewater system. So we're working to identify what types of expenses that particular grant would cover. Let's see. Page 8, I already spoke about the $11.9 million bridge loan. So I think that covers that. Utility billing, the billing department continues to research the age receivable balances, and as I explained before, most of them are related to the demolished structures that are still accumulating water and stormwater charges, but the owners, for whatever reason, have not been paying their bill. So they're researching that. In some cases, the people are simply unreachable. In others, they're refusing to pay. So once we have a list of, and categorized list of what the different situations are, some of these issues I think will need to be brought before town council to decide on what the policy should be in certain cases. We also found, as a result of some of it, some billing errors that had occurred, and so we were able to correct those as they encounter those and identify what those might have been. We had one situation involving the town itself where we were being billed, but this wasn't part of the receivable problem, but it was kind of uncovered through that analysis. We were being billed large bills each month, and we thought originally it was from the irrigation system on the new ball field, but as it turns out, there was a water leak. So at least that's been identified now, and so we should be refunded for some of those charges. Financial policies. So we are working as a team. By that I mean other department heads, to compile a set of policies that is required as part of the Florida Recovery Obligation Calculation Program. This is through the Department of Emergency Management, and this is a program that they developed in order to encourage municipalities to be more fiscally responsible regarding their grants. And so as an incentive for that, they would like to see us have established policies and procedures that would demonstrate our fiscal responsibility for grant management. And the more of these you have in place, the higher score you receive, because we submit this to them and they evaluate it, and the higher score we receive, the more percentage of upfront payment we'll receive when it comes to emergency assistance. So rather than first expending the money and then waiting for reimbursement, we'll receive a portion up front. So that'll be a tremendous assistance for cash flow. And so we had submitted what we had originally, this was several months ago, in terms of policies and procedures. They reviewed it, and then they sent us back a list of suggested things that we should do to improve our score. And that's what we're working on now. So we did, one of the things I worked on is that they had recommended that we have an emergency financial plan. I finished that over the weekend, so I know it was not in your packet. I emailed it out this morning. Because it was just this morning, I don't expect you to review it, but I wanted you to have it so that you could see what we're working on. And then certainly, as you do have time, any feedback that you may have would be appreciated on the emergency financial plan. One of the things that was also missing, not missing, but a suggestion for an improvement, was a purchasing policy that was more robust in terms of language that would include in there. And so one of the outcomes of this work that was done on the policies and procedures was an improvement to the purchasing policy. And I tried to summarize that in the paragraph at the bottom of page 8, where one of the changes that it included was it reflected the current organizational structure, or in the sense that the purchasing function was actually reporting to the town manager rather than to finance. But in the original purchasing ordinance, apparently in the past it had been the case where purchasing reported to finance, and so there was many references to it being under the finance department, but in reality it's under the town manager's office, and so that language was changes to reflect the current structure. There was also language required by FDEM or encouraged to include, and that would be specific reference to adherence to a code of ethics, that there'd be a requirement for a cost or price analysis for any projects that are estimated to cost greater than $250,000, and that there be a requirement to analyze lease versus buy options. So that language was incorporated. Then at the same time, we adjusted the purchasing thresholds that govern the type of procurement method to be used. And so I put in the table on the top of page 9 that shows you what the old thresholds were and what the new thresholds are. So previously, if a purchase was between $500 and $4,000, there were 3 verbal quotes required. Now that range is $5,000 to $10,000, and this is more reflective of other municipalities around us. For example, Sanibel, that's the range that they have. Then we have the range of, instead of, for 3 written quotes, it used to be anything between $4,000 and $25,000. Now we have it from $10,000 to $75,000, and anything over $75,000 is required to have a bid issued or an RFP, request for proposals, issued. Although we have set the limit for bids or proposals to $75,000, for FEMA requirements, we're required to abide by the state's threshold. The state's threshold is $35,000, and any assistance from the state in the form of grants is also required to abide by that $35,000 threshold. So in reality, even though we have set $75,000 as our threshold, most of the time we'll be following the $35,000 threshold, because much of what we do is funded by state or federal grants of one form or another. The other activity that we've been involved with is assisting in preparing documentation that was required by the agreement for the CDBG DR grant award that the town has been awarded. We have been awarded $1,575,000 to be used for planning for infrastructure improvements. So here again, many of the things that they required was to have written policies regarding financial management, duplication of benefits, accounting policy, and internal control policy. We had, these things written in terms of accounting policies, internal control policies. The accounting policies are actually included in our audit reports each year. We had internal controls kind of drafted for the auditors when they do their field work. So those things we had, and we just formalized it a bit more into documents. The duplication of benefit policy, we really didn't have anything specific to that, although we did have practices in place to avoid any duplication of benefits. So we developed a policy that was based on Lee County's policy. And then the financial management policy is really financial management of grants is what they were looking for. And there again, we took Lee County's financial management policy because it was really a very thorough, accurate, or not accurate, what's the word? Well, it covered everything that could... Complete, that's the word, thank you. Complete. So that we followed it, we customized it to reflect our own organization, uniqueness. But that was also, so I have all 4 of those included at the end of the packet so that you can see what we put together. That was submitted to Lee County for as part of the agreement package that was approved by town council, and I believe it's still waiting to go through that signature process. But these policies, especially the financial management and the duplication of benefit policy, those could be made more general. So the ones that we drafted specifically for CDBG DR had references embedded in those policies to CDBG, DR, just like the Lee County policy had, because it was specific to them. But really, those practices are can be applied to all grant management. And so I took that policy and I made a more generalized version. I pulled out specific references so that we could use it for all grant management. And I did the same for the duplication of benefits. So now we have those policies as well. Just an update on the budget. The budget manager worked meticulously to prepare the budget worksheets. These are actually spreadsheets that are developed for each department, for each fund. They're distributed to the department heads. They were distributed to the department heads near the end of April. I, along with the town manager and the director of compliance and operations, met with each of the department heads in order to have like a preliminary meeting regarding their head counts, and it also involved human resources, so that we can get an understanding of any changes that they foresee needing for next year's budget. And the good news is I think we're fairly stable in the organizational structure we currently have. So there are just a few changes that are foreseen for next year. And now in these couple of weeks, we'll be working directly with department heads on their expense budgets and compiling those. And towards the end of May, we'll be meeting with the town manager again and the director of compliance and operations to review with each of the department heads what they have put together for their budgets, and to make sure that it makes sense to them, to the town manager and to the director of compliance, or if they have any additional input as well. And so what will happen then is all of these individual department budgets will be compiled into the general fund budget, so that we can have kind of like a worst case scenario type situation where this is what everybody thinks they need. It would be quote unquote approved tentatively by the town manager, and that's really like this becomes a starting point. And then the town council will look at that, and the finance department will try, by taking all the other estimated revenues into account, what is the millage rate revenue, the tax revenue and the millage rate that's required to generate that tax revenue to fund all of this. And that's where, if it's reasonable, that may be where it's left, other than over the next couple of months there'll be more fine-tuning of the budget. Or if there's a big gap between what would be a reasonable source of tax revenue and what's required, we may have to do some serious adjustments to the budget. But it's just a starting point, because we need to set the maximum millage rate by the end of June. And so this kind of gives something to work with in terms of what the need might be. And I envision that the audit committee, like once we have this preliminary budget put together, that we could make that available to all of you, and then you could, and however manner you wish to be involved, you can review it, you can meet with me, with whoever, and to have explanations. And then your input is certainly welcome, because I know that the town council would appreciate that. I would appreciate that. And then this way we can make sure that there's many eyes on the budget and on where we're going in the future. And then the last thing is I did include the usual set of financial statements. So I got the balance sheet, the statement of revenues and expenditures, cash flow statements. I did include the lost revenue estimate for 2024. I do have the budget versus actual, but it's just really a line item, budget versus actual, just for the general fund. I can provide one by department if you think that would be helpful at some point. It's a lot more volume, and I just didn't want to overwhelm you, but I'm happy to provide it because we're not trying to hide any detail. I just don't want to overwhelm you with it. And then I also provided that statement of cash flows since Hurricane Ian, because to me, I think that's a very interesting view of of the impact of Hurricane Ian on the town to this day. So I have all of that in here. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
I have a question. It's related to the new policies that you have in here. Did anybody review them, or are we having the external auditors double check those financial policies?
Well, the accounting policy, the internal control policy, that is something the auditors get. The financial management policy, it's Lee County's. I mean, basically it's theirs on the duplication of benefits. So in the sense that it's already been vetted and approved by their county, but no, I mean, it was distributed to the managers here, to the town manager, but it was not formally reviewed by anyone. But I did want to include it here.
Well, if it came from somewhere else, then someone else reviewed it.
Yes, yes, okay. But, and feel free, because these are not set in stone, so if you see anything that could be improved, we certainly want to continue to improve upon them. Or if you see something missing, for sure.
I do have another question. Given that the meeting is, I think, the second Monday of the month, does that inhibit you from getting your job done? I mean, doing month-end closing and that type of thing. Should this meeting be later in the month? Because it seems like you're rushing to try to get a lot of stuff together.
Well, I think traditionally it's been the second Monday of the month. It could be later. It would be easier for me, certainly, to get the financial statements done for you. But on the other hand, to be I think getting them done as soon as possible is a good thing. And so to be under that pressure is kind of a way for me to make sure that they're done. So,
Then we'll leave it.
yeah, I do appreciate the consideration.
I have a question. We had spoken 2 months ago about our CD interest rate,
Yes,
and so it says here that we have over 300,000 that just got redeemed.
Patreon?
so the one that was redeemed was moved into the operating fund, because that's where we're getting 5.1% interest.
So that's our plan, is to get them out of that low interest and moving where we're getting 5%.
Yes, because I mean
makes sense.
these were terribly low, and I was very disappointed with the bank that happened. And I think part of why this happened, apparently, I think because they automatically renewed the last time, and my assumption was that it would work like any other automatic renewal, where it's just whatever is the new current rate for those CDs.
Yeah.
Well, with that particular bank, they renew, if it's an automatic renewal, it drops down to 0.1%. And we didn't know that until it was too late. No. So I thought, okay, I don't think we want to keep our dollars there.
That's punitive.
So that's why we did move it out, and we did deposit it with First Foundation Bank.
And our plan is to get the next two in August. And
Yes, because I mean it's just a little bit of interest, but I don't want to lose that little bit just
it's silly.
to wait. So we'll be there soon.
Thank you.
Are there any member items? Are you through, Joe?
I'm through.
Are there any member items on report? None. So our next meeting is scheduled for June 10th at 9 a.m. We have to take a vote on the 28th.
No.
Okay. Who motions for adjournment? Michael votes for adjournment.
Second.
Brian seconds. Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.